next to him. He said that he was thinking of using his free time to look for Koli Korolev. 3 schoolchildren approached him, after which he raised his head and said that there was no point in him staying here anyway. He looked at them and waited for what they would say. The schoolchild said that John Jay was looking for him. Let him follow them. Tenhyun smiled while flipping through his book and asked what if he didn't want to. The man remained silent and asked with a smile, didn't he manage his aunt's restaurant? He was very surprised to hear this and asked how he knew. The man said that he asked him to tell him this. He didn't have parents, his aunt was already having a hard time. Did he want to make her life even more difficult? He closed his eyes and told him not to worry, they would still make him go to him. A huge explosion thundered in that room, causing the doors to shatter into pieces and the bookshelves to fall along with the books. Tenhyun held the student by the throat, causing him to bleed from the mouth. He held his hand and coughed. The protagonist put the other 2 students on the floor, they were unconscious next to him. He held the opponent above him and said that he shouldn't make him ask twice. That fool Lee John Jae, where is he? After a while, when the huge hall with the stands was empty, the gymnasium was filled with rays of sunlight. There were 3 people standing in the gymnasium. Lee with his guard and Tenhyun. Seo Hundo, who was an A-rank hunter and Lee's bodyguard, said that this was amazing. He stretched out his hand in front of him and activated his skill. Lee asked, smiling, what exactly? He said that since he came here, he used the status-reducing skill several times, but it doesn't work at all. If he has such a level of resistance, then he's probably an awakened A-rank. Tenhyun was emitting a very powerful dark energy. Lee laughed and said, so he was awakened after all. Then they should talk like friends? He remained silent and looked at him with a stony face. Lee said that he was harsh, but in fact, he did not intend to harm him. Rather, he wanted to find out about him. After graduating, he was creating a guild that would become the successor to the Taisen group. But even a genius like him could not do everything alone. Does he know what he needs? He needs personnel. Not losers like Bae Hyun-soo, but truly talented people. He pointed his finger at the protagonist and shouted that people like him now. So let him forget about old grudges and be with him. Then, of course, he will have wealth and fame. His family will also be able to escape life in the Eastern Ditch. Tenhyun said with a serious look that this is bullshit. He activated the stone skin and asked what he wanted to know about him. Wealth, fame? He said menacingly that the guy had crossed the line. Lee did not expect such an action from him, which made him a little stupefied. Then he exhaled and said with a smile that it was true. He began to burn with rage and said that after all, psychos need to be shown their place. Soul sat on the floor and created space. Space is a barrier skill that surrounds space with a shield. The magical powers inside the shield cannot be felt from the outside. The entire gymnasium was covered in a magical barrier. He stood up and clapped, then he said that this way the entire school will not know about their fight. Then what permission do they have to start the inspection? Before he finished his sentence, they had already attacked each other. Tenhyun swung his stone fist, and Lee swung his flaming fist. They clashed fists, and then a huge explosion was created. Their fists touched in a confrontation, causing the stones on the protagonist's hands to fly off. Lee jumped away from him, and then a huge explosion occurred. Tenhyun spat blood from his mouth after the explosion and screamed. His opponent gloated and laughed. He created fire around himself again and screamed, what does he understand now? The bodyguard watched the many explosions and just stood there. He thought that he felt sorry for this guy. Probably an awakened A-rank with high body strengthening skills. With such a level of fighting instinct and willpower, it is hard to believe that he is still a schoolboy. Probably usually he can't even find an opponent. But today's battle is definitely worth it. They continued to fight each other fiercely, attacking from more advantageous sides. Lee struck him in the chest and struck him with fire. The so-called fruit of talent S-Rank. The bodyguard watched the fight carefully, and thought that he had no chance of winning at all. Let him just learn his lesson and give up. But suddenly he noticed something in the details. Tenshin did not lose hope at all and advanced as if he was just gaining strength. Tenshin managed to strike first and hit his opponent right in the face, causing him to fly back and crash to the floor. Soul was surprised and screamed that this could not be. He threw his master away? He thought about how he could do this. Lee broke through the floor and tried to go inside himself. He began to burn with anger and shouted that this fool, how dare he? And his body? He can't move. The bodyguard thought, how can he not move? His skill is not limited by armor? Who is this anyway? What did he do? Tenhyun smiled and rejoiced at his victory. He said that he finally succeeded. There are a total of 3 skills that the protagonist acquired thanks to the predator. These are stone skin, invisibility, paralysis. However, he did not use all of his skills from the beginning. C-rank paralysis cannot easily overcome the resistance of SS rank. Invisibility is quickly destroyed by a wide range of fire attacks. And predator is a last resort. And it should not be used haphazardly. Therefore, Tenhyun's goal was to accumulate paralysis in the enemy in close combat. The skill to reduce status has a great effect if it is enhanced by a hit, and not used from a distance. In other words, if paralysis is applied repeatedly with continuous strikes, then even with the opponent's resistance at the C-rank level. Even after several attempts to apply paralysis, the resistance was established successfully, he would not be able to withstand. He stood in front of his defeated opponent and looked closely. The bodyguard opened his mouth and thought, "This is incredible." He defeated his master in a direct confrontation, so beyond anyone's expectations. But this is a battle. Lee said that he admitted, it seems he underestimated him too much. Tenhyun did not expect him to react like this. Lee took out a crystal and said that otherwise, he would not have been beaten by trash like him. So now he is too. He broke the precious shard in his hand, which allowed him to find strength and stand up, and behind him, a huge monster of fire and smoke appeared, which his opponent did not expect from him. He said that he will be a worthy opponent. Tenhyun began to run away while the huge monster tried to hit him and get him. After he ran away, he swung his big stone fist. While he was trying to jump towards his enemy, the monster opened his mouth and released a flame of fire. At that moment, the flame and the stone collided. The flame was able to free Tenhyun's hand from the stones and an explosion occurred, which sent him flying. He did not expect this. The huge monster was watching his opponent. The bodyguard thought that this was his master's skill, the true form of the C-rank flame heart. In his normal human form, it would be difficult to reveal the true power of his rank. But before that, he used a magic enhancement stone. The magic stone, the heart of the monster, is a product obtained through refining. It temporarily enhances magic power. If this is what he saw, then now his master has the ability to fully unleash his C-rank power. But there is one problem. He started shouting at him to stop and hurry up. Is he really going to kill him? Besides, that magic power is too strong for him, he can't handle it. That all his blood vessels would burst due to the leakage of magical energy. Lee felt a high superiority over everyone and did not listen to him. He released a powerful explosion of his bodyguard and asked him to be silent. He asked, he is just a bodyguard, so how dare he give orders? This man humiliated him, and he asked him to stop. Tenhyun tried to find strength, and stood up. He looked at the crazy eyes of his opponent. Lee looked madly and screamed that no one should order him. He created explosions and fireballs, then he screamed again, laughing hysterically, for the protagonist to die, let him not be. Soul watched the fight anxiously and thought that his master had completely gone crazy. How can he calm him down and stop him? He ran closer to the protagonist and screamed, "Is he alive there? Let him stop fighting. Let him just run away. He will somehow stop him, and let him quickly leave." He reached into the hole where Tenhyun was sitting. Tenhyun just punched him in the face, and he flew back a few meters. He came out of the smoke and asked if he should run away. But he was the one who started the fight first. Of course, he admits that the C-rank is completely different. A system window popped up saying that fatigue, mana, and stamina were restored. He said that then he would also become himself. He activated the Predator skill and filled his eyes with rage. Some time later, in the South Korean Players Association building, Ji was sitting at his desk, and Go Taewook was standing in front of him. Ji screamed in surprise, "How is it 1,900? How is it 2,300? Is this true?" He confirmed his words and said that Lee has 1,900. Lemaine has 2,300. Both are confirmed awakened C-rank. The female workers in the office didn't believe it either. They looked at the tablet and said that even if they were C-rank, how could he even have 1,900 points without training? That's already comparable to an A-rank hunter? Isn't that the level of a Japanese saint? Someone among them started laughing and shouted that finally, their new Korea had a saint-rank hunter? Go Taewook thought that she was a saint, so as one of the hunters representing Japan, she was 19 years old when she first checked her level. She turned out to be a monster whose total points had already exceeded 2,500 points. That was absolutely right. Even that monster only had 2,500 points. Then what the hell was going on with that guy's points, whose number he saw was 5,096? Could it be just an illusion? An error in his skills? What could it be? After that, he left with his men. He started to hurry because he had to find out everything himself. Around the same time in the gym, Soul didn't understand what was happening at all. He was in complete shock. He said that this can't be. How did he do this and who is he? Ten-hyun took over that fire monster with his predator skill. He was able to split it into pieces and defeat it. Lee started to panic and screamed, "Why is that? Why? Why did a fool like him turn him away? He is the heir, he is a C-rank." He tried to scream his name one last time, and then the predator swallowed him. Ten-hyun said, "What does he care about his rank, or the heir to whatever he is? When he has the power of a king." He sent a whirlpool of dark energy at him, causing him to scream in fear. Then the predator energy slowly caught up with him and completely swallowed him. A huge explosion occurred in the building, which was able to overcome that bodyguard barrier. The building collapsed and there was a fire burning inside. Lee was lying unconscious on the floor. Soul was trying to reach his master, sweat was pouring down his face, and his body was shaking from fatigue. Ten-hyun stood over his fallen opponent and said that he surprised him. The bodyguard sat down in front of his master. His face was covered in blood. The protagonist thought that the A-rank hunter, that bodyguard, did not expect him to pull Lee out, even though he was using Predator. It doesn't matter since he already took his skill anyway. Soul was trying to catch his breath and asked what he was even thinking? His master is the heir to the T-San group. How is he going to deal with the aftermath? Ten-hyun asked, can he see it himself? Who started the fight first? Does he think he won't tell? And anyway, does he look like a person who would be scared by something like this? He raised his head and smiled, and then told him not to worry, he was not going to kill him anyway. Soul was confused and said that in return, he should receive payment for his life. The protagonist screamed, payment for his life? They need to look and count, he is the heir of T-San group after all. He put his hand to his face and asked, smiling, shouldn't he receive 1 billion for it? The building completely began to collapse and burn. The students and school staff began to panic, because they did not understand how this happened. One of the adults shouted that everyone needed to move away. What was going on? The students were discussing that this was a demon attack and a demon monster? They were completely terrified. Lim Yang stood among them and thought that this was not so, the feeling of strong flame magic, this is definitely it. This is definitely Lee's power. But who is his opponent? She imagined him jumping in front of the main character and trying to get to him. This is how she imagines the relationship between them. The nurse stood in front of the schoolchildren and said that in any case, they are here for now. At that moment, Lim Yang ran past her. The nurse noticed this and shouted after her, but she did not listen to her at all. She ran to the gym and thought that she was very wrong. After all, she did not check the gym. It was her fault. She ran inside and thought that it would be very good if everyone remained alive by this moment. Lim Yang saw Lee, who was lying on the floor unconscious, and Ten-hyun, who was calmly standing next to him and smiling. The main character was glad and said that she came in time, he just needed a witness, that is, not a witness, but someone who could move him with him. She did not understand anything at all and was in complete shock. He said that he should be moved to the medical center or better yet, straight to the hospital. She screamed, what happened here? He scratched his head and said that he didn't know what he was doing, but he was lying here alone. Maybe he fell down the stairs or something. She thought, how could he fall down the stairs? He said that he didn't know what happened anyway, so she shouldn't tell anyone that she saw him here. He started to leave. Lim Yang screamed after him for him to stop and explain properly what happened. But at that moment, she looked in his direction, and he was not there. She was very surprised by this. Lim Yang was left alone in the gym, and Lee was lying unconscious in her arms. After a while, far from that place, the protagonist came out of hiding. He exhaled, said that it was great, she would somehow take care of Lee, and the Taesin group would not bother him either. The issue was more or less resolved, wasn't it? A system window with his characteristics popped up in front of him. He asked, is that even something? One of the criteria in his characteristics was a scar, which was equal to 5. Monk's heart at the sea level increases the ability of party members. He shouted, a scar? Doesn't this only apply to appearance, like celebrities? And how did this even get here when he absorbed Lee's power? Had his luck turned against him? He thought that besides, the skill he received was not called a flaming heart, but a monk's heart. It increases the ability of a party member. Lee had such a skill too? But that's even good. Skills that affect the entire party are rare, regardless of their level. Since he has several skills, he can combine them, but the monk's heart is much better. He smiled and said that he was very lucky. This is very cool. After a while, 3 cars drove up to him and shone their headlights at him. He did not understand what was happening. They started honking. Go Taewook and his team got out of the car and said that the student had finally been found and he had some questions for him. They needed to start with this. Taehyun was scared and thought, why is this person here now? Go Taewook asked menacingly, what did he do in the gym? After a while, in the castle, a powerful man was sitting on a chair that resembled a throne, and 3 black dogs were sitting next to him and barking. He put down a glass of alcoholic drink and asked, so this is the result? His only son is in the hospital, but as if that wasn't enough, he paid for his life. The compensation was 1 billion. Will Seoul be able to solve this problem as soon as possible? He was kneeling in front of him and trembling. He apologized to him many times. He said that whatever he ordered, he told him to do what he thought was right. Seoul was very surprised by this and asked if he heard correctly. The powerful man laughed and said that he was very impudent, which was very funny. He pointed his finger at him and said that no matter how much they paid, they should also get compensation. He snapped his fingers, and then several people entered the room. The bodyguard began to panic and shouted that his opponent was a very young boy. This is ruthless. The company director began to glow and said in a powerful voice that he had enough. He would not let the dog bark. He smiled and glowed with fire. He was a S-Rank hunter named Lee Jang-soo, also the CEO of Taesen Group. Around this time, on the road near the city, Go Taewook asked what he was doing at the gym. The protagonist thought, how did he end up here? The gym, is he talking about the explosion? Or the incident at the lecture? Which of these is he talking about? He is the deputy director of the association. The chances of him personally visiting the scene of the fire are slim. But what if he already knows that he is the culprit and has made his move? It remains to be seen. He smiled and asked what happened in that gym. He means the explosion there? He asked again, what explosion? Then he turned around and said he was referring to the fire that was going on there. It is nothing. This problem will still have to be dealt with by other organizations. But he still did not hear an answer from him. Taehyun thought that he did not know about the explosion. The deputy asked again what he was doing in the gym. He said, smiling, that by talking about this, he still does not know what is happening. But Taewook was very surprised along with his team and decided to ask him again. He answered that he was sure that their visit was related to the fact that they wanted to invite him to the hunter test. He laughed and shouted, the hunter test then? On what basis? The protagonist activated the predator skill and asked what his foundation is this not enough yet? Go Taewook was very surprised, thought that this can't be. He became even stronger in these hours. So this number was either a coincidence nor a mistake. Who is he? He asked, why are his clothes so dirty? At this moment, Taehyun calmed his dark energy and shocked with this question. After a while, in the protagonist's apartment, Hwang shouted, how is this a hunter's exam? Is he serious? Is he really going to the hunter's exam? Taehyun pumped his arms with dumbbells and tiredly said that this is exactly it, and the exam will be in a month. Hwang was very delighted with this information, after which he said that he is a king and a god, a general and an emperor, his majesty a cousin. He sighed and asked, is he joking? He thought that as for the gym, Taesen Group will take care of everything. Go Taewook's suspicions will most likely be dispelled. The exam is in a month, so for now he can focus on training. So there will be no more problems. But suddenly his phone started vibrating and making sounds. He noticed an incoming call. After a while, 2 assassins were standing near his house. One of them grabbed the association hunter by the throat and asked why the association hunter was guarding some high school student's house. The hunter grunted in pain, trying to get out. The white brother said that it pissed him off. The black brother squatted and said that he was probably one of those participating in the upcoming hunter test. Because this is how they take care of rising stars. There were 2 assassins, a black brother and a white brother. The older brother with the black color is an A-rank demon with the skills of stealth, body enhancement. The white brother turned and asked, a rising star? But he is just a brat with little experience, isn't that right? The younger brother with the white color is a B-rank demon with the skill of stealth. The black brother said with a chuckle that it was absolutely true. Even if he was a promising hunter, without enough experience he was nothing. He shouted with madness in his eyes that they would show everyone what a real awakening was. At the same time, tension appeared behind him. He released the association hunter and slapped the white brother's face while holding him by the throat. The black brother turned around and was very surprised by this. He ran at him with a dagger and shouted that he was a freak. Who was he? The protagonist threw away the white brother who was already unconscious and met the black brother with his stone knee. After smashing his face into pieces, he said that he was their small fry with no experience. About a few hours before, when the gym was burning, the bodyguard sat in front of Tenshin and shouted, "What do you mean a billion?" Even if he keeps quiet about this incident, it is not up to him alone to decide. He held out his hand and asked, "Who does not know this?" He is not such a bad person as to hold his subordinates accountable. Let him just do his best to reach an agreement. And in case he betrays him. He held out his hand to the bodyguard and activated the circuits. The bodyguard looked at his next skill and was very scared. Tenhyun extended his hand to him and asked if he could draw a conclusion. A system window popped up with the oath of an awakened one. It is the ability to make a contract created by an awakened one using magical power. If violated, an eternal random penalty will be imposed. The conditions are simple. First, along with the abandoned compensation of 1 billion, let them do their best to hush up the incident in the gym. The news released a video where a female reporter said that she found out that the fire in the middle school gym was caused by a gas explosion. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Tenhyun continued that he saw the second thing like this. At the moment his phone rang, it was Soul calling him. He was standing in the forest and said that it was him. According to the oath of the awakened, he must give them information about the killers. Tenhyun said that he would be informed in advance of any countermeasures. At the moment when he fought with the two brothers, the black brother fought him with daggers that were tied to his hands. He struck him and tried to hit him, but the protagonist moved very quickly and understood his tactics. He concentrated his strength and struck the black brother, but he failed. The black brother went around him from behind and struck, but struck into emptiness. Tenhyun said that the brothers are white-black. They say that their specialty is hidden attacks using invisibility. As he thought, nothing special. He was able to get ahead of him and kicked his face into the floor. He activated his skill and said that after all, this is probably all they can do. Around the same time, on the road in the city, in one of the cars was Yua Yun. She asked, she heard that the selection of participants for the hunter exam is over? It will gather promising hunters from all over the country. Who is the chairman waiting for? Surely Shin Yunbak from Busan, a C-rank? At that moment, she was talking to him on the phone. He laughed and asked who knows. Of course, he is great, but in fact, he is most looking forward to her little brother, of course. She said that her little brother is not that small. How can he achieve anything in this family? He laughed again and said that she is still picky as always. So who is she herself looking forward to? That guy named Shin? She said that he has not heard something interesting yet. He asked what kind of interesting information is that? She said that in addition to the other C-ranks, she heard that there was a guy who was personally visited by the vice principal, Go Tae-wook. He asked again because he was worried that he had heard wrong. She asked that it was quite curious, wasn't it? Quite interesting, the skill level of this awakened, since he personally checked and confirmed it. At this moment, Tenhyun looked at his hand and the two brothers, after which he frowned and asked, why is this happening again? A system window popped up saying that he lacked physical capabilities. Due to overload, using the predator is impossible. Sometime later, somewhere in the alley of the city, the white and black brothers sat tied up opposite each other in front of the association workers. Tenhyun and Go Tae-wook stood behind them. One of the hunters asked, was it not enough that these black and white brothers were bothering the association hunters, now they have stooped to high school students? Another hunter asked, doesn't he think that these demons are only getting more disgusting? Go Tae-wook thanked the student for the information and asked if he had any ideas on who was behind the attack. The protagonist hesitated, then turned around and said that he didn't have much information. He asked if it was possible that the list of participants had been leaked. He thought he would have to call for backup. Tenhyun thought that if he had wrongly accused that company here, instead of dealing with the situation, he would have only gotten into a lot of trouble. And the immediate priority right now is not the Taesan group, but his lack of physical ability. Therefore, due to the overload, using the predator is impossible. This is his main problem. Due to the lack of physical ability, he can't even use his skills, so what is the point of them? So he will have to work on increasing his abilities. How can he increase his abilities? Raising the awakening level of using the predator on a monster still requires a predator. Raising the awakening level of using the predator on awakened still requires a predator. He thought about it and asked, it seems like he only has one option. After a while, in a large sports complex in the city, Yura stood at the entrance, greeting the guests and handing out leaflets. She said that this is the best training center in New Korea. She is a guide to Blackhead. How can she help them? Ten-hyun stood at the entrance with his cousin. Hwang began to be indignant and asked, what other Blackhead? Here, to register, you need to have money, and strength, and everything. And he wants to go there? He asked, why else did he come here? Yura thought, are they still school children? She awkwardly began to wave her hands and said that they have a training center here. The protagonist handed her a card and told her to register 2 people. She did not understand at all, but then she saw a gold card with the inscription SVIP, which surprised her very much. Ten-hyun asked if this would be enough. She looked at the card and thought, this is one of the largest guilds' SVIP alchemist card? Where did he get it? Is he a relative of a high-ranking hunter? Or maybe the owner? But if she just makes the payment, if something goes wrong, she might get into trouble. What should she do? Another trainer came up to them, he struck a pose and started laughing. He shouted that the girls seemed to be in a dilemma. They all turned their attention to him and looked at him questioningly. He winked and said that this was not a place where you can enter just by paying money. Yura admired his strength and called him Mr. Kangchul. He was a B-rank trainer, not a hunter, but he is the strongest Kangchul, a member of Blackhead and a rookie killer. His skill is muscle strengthening, and the special thing about it is that he developed himself. Hwang shouted, is this really the strongest Mr. Kangchul? That is such a cool name. Isn't it? The protagonist thought, what kind of name is this? Is he crazy? He continued to show off his muscles and said that he is a rookie killer. The strongest Mr. Kangchul. Let them meet him. The other coaches looked at him awkwardly and said that he was picking on them now. They felt sorry for the newbie kids. Kangchul showed off his muscles and asked if they could see how everyone was shaking when they heard his name. If they came in now, he would show them. Ten-hyun asked what he was talking about. He was a weak brat. He didn't understand at all why they were complaining about him. Hwang started to panic and tried to stop his cousin. The coach's veins swelled and he asked how dare he say that he was stronger than him. He asked if he didn't believe him, could they bet? The loser would have to pay a membership fee for 1 year. He laughed and shouted that he didn't know anything about it. But then they could do it. After a while, they entered a programmed space. The coach said that he should prove it. In real life, they were sitting on huge chairs with helmets on their heads. There were many fans and observers in that space, and his cousin was among them. Hwang began to panic and shouted, what is this? Is this an abyss? One of the spectators said that this is a virtual training program, a virtual porter. Hwang heard this and asked again, a virtual porter? Virtual porter is a competitive training in which they must carry the maximum weight, defeat the maximum number of B-class monsters and reach the destination in the shortest time in virtual reality, completely identical. Yura watched this and said that when it comes to fighting for supremacy in the training center, this is the most common way, but it is too disadvantageous against the opponent of the strongest Kangchul. The coach filled his eyes with madness and laughed. He swung at the monster and shouted that he was a stupid brat. How dare he argue with him? His skill, increasing muscle, is his way out. He gave the monster a powerful blow, causing it to shatter into pieces. He shouted that his agility maneuver was excellent. A skill that is perfect for a virtual porter. And what's more, the weight he can lift is on another level. He easily killed the monsters in his path and shouted that he would beat him well, even if he was a first grader. Suddenly, he noticed that the monsters around him had been blown to smithereens, but he hadn't touched them. At that moment, Ten-hyun wasted no time and took advantage of every minute. He set up a tactic and successfully stuck to it. He ran towards the monsters he saw on his way without fear in his eyes and quickly defeated them. There was no fear in his eyes, he just started smiling more and more. There were a lot of monsters, they all ran towards him like a magnet. In the end, he killed 999 monsters. The coach saw this and was shocked. He opened his mouth and stood still. The protagonist came closer to him and said that he had only planned to visit for 30 days anyway, but the training must have gone well because of the maximum weight. Everyone in the stands opened their mouths and didn't understand how he managed to do it. Huang was standing with a sign that said they believed in him. Tenhyun asked, what was the name of the coach? The argument was certainly difficult, but now let him pay and get lost. A winner's mark appeared above the main character, and a huge backpack with bodies hung behind his back. After some time, at a huge stadium, a helicopter was flying over the square, where there were a huge number of people. A reporter was standing in the helicopter and said that 30 days had passed since the announcement of changes to the hunter exam. Finally, this long-awaited day had come. The hunter's license test. Everyone listened attentively to what would happen next. The reporter said that the Hunter Association stated that since this time minors were also invited to participate by recommendation, people of all ages from all over the country were flocking there, to the association's testing center. The most anticipated hunters. Unrivaled in close combat, Tekken Hong Jungkook at A-Rank. Also the one with the superior combat sense that even C-Ranks can't defeat, Druid Lee Gilson at A-Rank. Thunderer Shin at C-Rank who still has no rivals in Busan. Also the one who is rumored to have the highest score among those taking the exam, the rising star of Saint Rank, Lim A-Yun at C-Rank. And other candidates as well. A large number of talented people are planning to take part in this exam. More and more people were gathering near the stadium. Reporter Kim was near the square and started shouting that it was terrible. It was so far away. So far away. If she didn't do another report today, she would simply be fired. She started crying. She was a new reporter for SU Economic with E-Rank typing skill. Her goal was to interview the participants of the hunter exam from the chute. She sat in front of the crowd of people and said that, let alone interview the participants, she couldn't even take a photo. She knelt down, hung her head and asked, what can her E-Rank do? Her life is ruined. The protagonist came up to her from behind. She turned around and looked at him questioningly. He asked, why are there so many people? And then how will the participants be able to get through? She thought, is it really a participant? He passed by and said that, anyway, it is boring as hell. She tried to reach out to him and asked, pleadingly, could he please give her an interview? He turned around and did not quite understand what she wanted. After a while, the organizer shouted Tenhyun's name. And then, that the exam starts in a minute. He came up and said that he was almost late because of the sudden interview. It was the girl who took up his time for her interview. Tenhyun smiled and said that even so, it is worth taking care of the image in advance. He walked through the tunnel and joined all the standing participants, of which there were a lot. They were standing in an ordinary and unremarkable room, waiting for the exam to begin. They had stickers with their numbers attached to their clothes. Lim Young noticed Tenhyun in the crowd and spoke to him. He asked, why was the class monitor here? She asked, what happened to his body? He said that he just trained a little, that's all. She opened her mouth and thought, is this called training a little? She heard that he had awakened, but how could so many changes happen in a month? She showed him her surprise and said that this time he had changed at all. The loudspeaker announced that the young people would be the future of the new Korea. All of them are welcome. This hall was the first round of the test, where the future hunters would be chosen from among the awakened. Now he would explain the rules of the first round. From the first, have them look at their chests. There was an exam badge with each of their numbers hanging on them. In this exam, they had to collect 5 badges, including their own. This is the so-called exam badge battle. Time is limited, they are given 1 hour. The floor began to collapse, and all the examinees began to fall. They were allowed to do everything except kill. The participants began to shout, what is going on here? Why is the floor under their feet starting to disappear? The whole space is changing. The organizer announced the start of the first round of the exam. Everyone began to fall down and scream in confusion. Lim A-Yun stood on the platform. Various participants began to attack her from all sides. Someone shouted that if she did not want to be beaten, she should attack first. She activated her ice attack, created many ice crystals around, which threw most of the participants away from her. A group of observers stood behind the screens and watched the fight. One of them said that this is a real future star. Her skills are excellent. Another said that the rest of the test takers are unremarkable. Everyone, without a doubt, surpassed the skills of the previous test takers. And the one he is especially waiting for is participant Shin from Busan. It's been 20 minutes since the test started. Not to mention every effective strike, no one can get close to him. Really amazing abilities. Lim A-Yun and Shin, who will be better between the two? Go Taewook stood behind them, poking at the screen and saying nothing. He thought that considering the points, their interest was valid, but he saw a much more interesting number. He was sure that the protagonist would easily pass this test. Let him show everyone himself. His strength and everything he has. He watched his abilities and how he fought with the participants. Go Taiwook was shocked and shouted, "What is this?" Awakened A rank, Hong, he is currently using the skill Iron Skin. An awakened C rank, Ten Hyun, is currently using the skill Stone Skin. Did he misunderstand this guy's skills? He can't believe that he was tested by a newly awakened A rank person. He didn't dodge a single strike. Sweat began to pour down his face, and he thought that he had not avoided a single blow for a minute. Was he? At this moment, Ten Hyun ran at his opponent with a fierce attack, but his opponent met him with a fist and managed to hit. It was as if he was deliberately running into his enemy's fist. Hong shouted that he was an idiot. Why was he challenging him? Stone Skin is a perfect backwards compatible skill with Iron Skin. It was not enough for him to fight him head-on, and he deliberately threw punches that were supposed to miss. Ten Hyun sighed and said that he was talking too much. The other man was very surprised and watched. He wiped the blood from his face, activated his predator skill, and said that it made sense in general. A system window popped up that stamina and charisma had increased by 1. Even after a month of training, the seal on the predator was not broken. He thought that this meant that his ability was still not enough. The way to increase stats through training is to provide the maximum stimulation that the body can handle. This means that training is ultimately a struggle to the limit. Therefore, his training is not over yet. They continued to wrestle with each other. Hong dealt him one blow after another, and then caught his blow back. Ten Hyun was able to damage his enemy's shell, causing his face to become defenseless. He screamed that he was a monster. Hong lost his shell and was unconscious. Ten Hyun looked at him, and then tore off his badge. At this moment, he has 2 badges. Go Taiwook began to laugh in admiration and cheer. He screamed that of course it was, he was crazy. The other observers were scared by his reaction and said that the vice principal was very excited. It seems that he was very eagerly awaiting the rising stars. He began to wait impatiently, and thought that this method of training in a large-scale battle for survival was so bold that it was even scary. But now it was a problem. It was all for the sake of stats, but he had used up too much stamina in this battle. Now he would conserve it, so it would be best to gather the weak. But suddenly he noticed and understood what was going to happen next. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. Someone from the observers shouted, "Who was that? An awakened C rank?" He didn't know who his opponent was? Or was he going to surrender voluntarily? Everyone pointed and looked at the protagonist with excitement. At that moment, Ten Hyun stood in front of one of the strongest participants in this exam. Shin stood on his huge platform, and around him lay many bodies of participants. Lightning swirled around him. No one could get close to him. He looked at another opponent and asked, smiling, "Who is he?" "He is an awakened C rank, and at the moment he owns badges in the amount of 147 pieces." He stuck badges on his shirt and stood confidently. Ten Hyun admired and asked how many badges he now has in total. He began to reread them and admired, after which he clenched his bloody fist and said that it was much more than 5. Ten Hyun jumped onto the platform towards him, and they began to fight. A huge explosion occurred near them. They flew apart from each other after this explosion. Shin threw lightning at him, and he successfully dodged them. He activated the stone body on his legs and kicked him in the face, causing the stone to fly off his leg. Shin asked, "Is he really fast?" "But they can't even see the attacks, right?" After a while, they were still fighting. Ten Hyun jumped off his opponent to another platform and thought that he was a C rank from Busan, a thunderer. He didn't expect it to be so difficult. Powerful lightning surrounded his entire body. Not only did it block all his attacks, but it also had such a range and destructive power that it could be used both in close combat and at a distance. In a situation where it was still impossible to use Predator, how could he break through this one? Shin smiled and asked why he didn't attack him. Maybe he wanted to get away from here too. He didn't wait and jumped onto his opponent's platform, charging a huge charge of lightning in his hand. Ten Hyun noticed it in time and was able to dodge. Shin did not lose his head and tried to hit him again, thus they jumped from platform to platform one after another. He laughed and asked, "Where is he going? Why is he running away?" He charged lightning at him with both hands, which made the attack much more powerful than the previous ones. The protagonist felt this attack in full. Shin admired himself and shouted, grinning, Just let him fight. Then he would definitely not be able to escape. Tenhen concentrated all his attention and strength on creating a stone body. He shouted and hit his opponent with a huge block of stone. He was able to destroy this huge stone with his electric discharge and called him names. He snapped his finger, and a blinding light lit up around. The protagonist did not expect this and began to cover his face from such a glow. Shin did not waste time, after which he jumped back, charging his hand with lightning, and threw it towards his opponent. Tenhyun didn't know what he was going to do next and just looked at the lightning in horror. A huge bolt of lightning flew into him, causing him to scream. Shin admired himself, laughed, he screamed, "Can he endure this? He seems cool." He thought, what an interesting opponent. Until now, everyone was only busy running away from him. He thought that only Lim Yang would be able to entertain him during the hunter's exam. But apparently, there was another interesting toy there. While he was admiring himself, a thing flew at him very quickly, which hit him right in the face. Shin did not expect it, and his nose started bleeding. He hesitated and thought, what was that? What happened? No attack from this guy could affect him. At this moment, Tenhyun developed his own method of attacking a special opponent. He found a convenient place and threw an object at him again. These stones managed to reach Shin and cause him considerable damage, causing him to move. He began to cough in pain. Of course, the stone's skin cannot penetrate the wrath of the rain god. Even if it goes beyond its limits, such blows will not leave a trace. But here, the examination halls are different. Since it was originally made of a material that can withstand the power of an awakened nova, unlike the stone's skin, does not lose its properties even if it crumbles. So if you use it as a weapon, it is the only way to overcome the wrath of the thunder god. Shin began to bleed and shouted that he was a cowardly fool. Tenhyun admired his new technique and shouted that this opponent is no match for him. He jumped on him with his body and was able to hit his opponent. Shin lost his glasses as he fell unconscious, spitting out his blood. Tenhyun looked at him with an admiring look. The observers saw a huge explosion on the platform. They shouted, "What happened? A C-rank beat a C-rank?" They all watched attentively and shouted, "What is Tenhyun doing?" Go Taewook stood to the side and smiled. He thought that he was making people nervous. In any case, he was doing great. He thought and watched. At that moment, Tenhyun was standing next to his defeated opponent. He took 3 badges from him and exhaled. He smiled and said that now he had all the badges. All that was left was to wait for the exam to end. At that moment, an ice attack flew at him. He managed to jump away from it and analyzed it. He thought, was it ice? An ice dome began to form around the platform he was standing on. He carefully watched as the ice surrounded the platform in the form of a planet. The dome began to freeze completely, and he began to understand what awaited him and who his next opponent was. The ice wrapped the entire platform, creating a space for the fight. Lim Yang appeared on the platform. She walked confidently towards the protagonist. He watched her gloomy gait with fear in his eyes. He thought, how did she do this now? And since when had she been watching a fight? She said that she believes that with strength comes responsibility. He did not understand why she was saying this. She said that strength without responsibility is just violence. He had become very strong. She did not expect that he would be able to defeat such a strong opponent as Shin. He said why she said this so suddenly. She replied that this was absolutely true. Apparently this is how he defeated Lee. Lim Yang put her hand in front of her and was about to throw her attack at him, but he managed to react and went invisible. She paid attention to this and activated the snowfall. He came out of invisibility and shouted that this snow was like a bomb. And so invisibility in this battle will become useless. She found him and kicked him in the face. He started to fall, and she screamed at him in anger that she trusted him back in the gym. She started throwing sharp shards of ice at him and screamed that she was not like Lee. She would not act recklessly for selfish reasons. One of the shards hit him and cut his face. She gathered ice energy around her hand and screamed that, however, she realized it when she saw him fight. In the end, with both Lee and Bae Hyun-soo, it was all him. It was all his doing. A huge block of ice crawled out from under Tenhyun, lifting him up and leaving him. He started to bleed and fell with a loud noise. Lemane looked at him majestically and said that using unauthorized skills is a crime. They are still in the hospital, but something probably happened to him too, so she will not file a complaint. However, he must refrain from taking the exam. Because he doesn't have the qualifications to be a hunter. Hyun tried to get up, but his body was shaking badly from the blows. She saw him start to get up and asked, "Does he still have strength?" She watched him in surprise. The protagonist stood up and asked, the unstoppable tyrantly, "Does he have strength? Responsibility? Qualifications?" In the end, she just wants to let him go? It's better to use the survival test as an excuse. He stood there covered in blood, bruises and snow. He said with a smile, "Let her stop being a coward." She stood there with her eyes bulging and agreed with him. Then she asked, "So this is his answer? Then there is no need to be lenient towards him anymore." She created a huge staff with her ice magic, then said with fury in her eyes that she will end this battle. He thought that the stone skin that had been broken hundreds of times had long since lost its function. Even if he uses stealth, she will quickly disappear from wide area attacks. The monk's heart that increases the level of abilities has already been activated. It is not enough to turn the tide. The predator is still sealed, and it does not have the stamina to cause paralysis in hand-to-hand combat like it did to Lee. In the end, all he can do now is this. He gathered his strength and ran towards her. She prepared a huge weapon and was about to strike. He carefully watched her body movements. She swung her weapon, and then the huge ice planet for the observers began to shine. A huge amount of ice and platforms were scattered due to the explosion and power. The observers began to panic and shouted, "What happened, a battle?" Nothing can be seen because of the fog. Go Taiwook said the protagonist's name with fear in his eyes, and then he noticed and did not understand what was happening. The observers froze in shock and asked, "What is this?" The platform on which this battle was taking place was almost completely cracked. There was a huge hole in the platform itself. On the very collapse, two opponents were lying on top of each other. Hyun was lying on top of Lim Ayan and holding her hands. He decided to choose the tactic of surprise and kissed her at the most opportune moment. She did not expect this at all and moaned from incomprehension. A few minutes earlier, when the main character was running towards his opponent, Lim Ayan swung a huge sledgehammer at him and hit him in the place where he should have been. She watched carefully and tried to understand if she had struck correctly. Then Hyun jumped on her. Then he thought that at the desperate last moment, what the main character was striving for was not a kiss at all, but paralysis. He grabbed her in flight and kissed her, due to which he was able to transmit paralysis to the girl. The success rate of the status deviation skill increases at close range rather than long range, and when it acts from the inside rather than the outside. So he mixed his blood with paralysis and forced her to swallow it. Of course, given the monstrous resistance of the C-class, this is just an adventure, but the result is obvious. He stood up and wiped the blood from his lips. She lay there and couldn't move. After she realized what had happened, she blushed with embarrassment and said that he was terrible. A system window popped up that paralysis had worked successfully. Resistance had failed. The opponent's mind had been fatally shocked. Charisma had increased by 3 units. He smiled and thought that this was almost a success. The protagonist looked around and noticed a loudspeaker. The loudspeaker announced that the first stage of the exam was over. The team will now carefully transport the exam participants. All test takers are to remain in place until the staff arrives. After which they repeated their announcement. After a while, since the first test was completely over, all the injured participants in the exam were immediately treated by the Mito Brigade. Even though Lim Ae-yun suffered from paralysis, lost her exam badge, and was unable to fight, she passed the first stage of the exam. In Hyun's case, he collected badges, and although there were only 7, his unexpected move and victory over Shin and Lim Ae-yun made everyone's attention on him in this exam. The participants were discussing him, that he defeated both of them. They were whispering that there were rumors that he was a C-rank. Was that true? I wonder how many points he had? Hyun walked past the result board and hid from prying eyes. He said that it would be good to have healing skills. He couldn't even walk. Should he get such a skill later? Shin suddenly appeared and shouted his name. He took notice and was ready to activate his skin skills. His opponent rushed at him with a lightning attack, but he managed to put a stone hand in front of himself. He was very surprised by the appearance of his opponent after the first stage. He shouted that he would not be able to do the same tricks here. A small explosion occurred between them. The other participants saw this and began to discuss, are they really going to fight again? It was that same Shin. Is he taking revenge for his defeat? They began to laugh and support him, that if there is one less successful candidate, it will only be a plus for them. Let him defeat him faster. Shin turned to the crowd of participants and activated lightning on them and shouted that he does not care about them. Let them shut up. The crowd of participants began to scream in pain. He turned back to the main character and shouted that they should fight fairly. Tenhyun smiled and said that he is crazy. He again gathered lightning in his hands and shouted that he was given the skill. He is teaching him. Who is the boss here? He seemed to be going crazy and laughing madly. Suddenly, everyone was pulled to the floor. Shin instantly pressed his entire body to the floor and pressed a small dent. No one understood what was happening. Tenhyun was standing very heavily on his feet, but he was able to withstand the pressure. All the other participants were also lying on the floor and could not do anything with themselves. Park Sungjun was walking towards them. He said that, in general, they were assholes. They couldn't just let everyone rest, could they? The protagonist began to panic and thought that this was the one. Park came up, moving his hand, and asked who was the little brat showing off among them. Tenhyun thought that he was a S-Rank hunter, one of the largest hunters from the New Korea Association, the future SS-Rank hunter. He looked at the protagonist in surprise and asked what was this. He was still standing? He gathered energy in his hand and activated more pressure on him, causing him to bend closer and closer to the floor. Tenhyun thought that he was a real devil. Although he had heard that the skills of awakened C-Rank and active C-Rank hunters felt completely different, he never thought it would be this much. Pak approached him and said that everyone should just look at him. Can he withstand this? Something that even veteran hunters can't bear. Let him see. He used his magic again and began to press him to the floor. Suddenly, the association staff began to interfere with him and shouted at him to stop. What is he doing? He was upset that he was caught doing such a wonderful thing. The staff shouted, what is he doing to the children who just finished the treatment? Does he want to expel them and even before the second test begins? Pak remained silent. The staff pounced on him and began to grab his arms. He said that he had no intention of expelling anyone. He was simply enforcing discipline. The employee shouted that this was complete nonsense. He shouldn't lie about rechecking their skills. Every exam is the same. They won't survive like this. If he does this again, he will report it to the association president. Park smiled and looked at the protagonist.